Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cold Hard Truth podcast. I'm Anish Gupta, and we have
Jared Arabian.
so we got Jared, a very special guest, a guy who comes on a lot for us. And obviously he's got his hat, he's repping it. He runs a Bengals page on Instagram, Bengals Central, and a podcast as well called the Bengals Den. I've actually been a guest on it. I had a great time on it. So please go follow those down below. I'll leave both the links in the description. But how you been, man? How has been, as a Bengals fan, and just how's the NFL season been? Because it's already been the halfway point almost. And man, time flies.
It's been a really, really interesting year for the Cincinnati Bengals. But first, Anish, thank you so much for having me on today, brother. This is actually this podcast right here is kind of what got me into doing podcasts. And
Feels so proud to hear you say that, man.
It's kind of really, really crazy. I'm super pumped to be back. But it's been a really weird season for the Bengals already. We're only 8 games in, a lot of ups and downs, as people might know. But it's kind of sticking with the blows of the ups and downs and kind of trying to even it out and stay focused on the goal. So
believe me, we've had our own ups and downs, obviously, as we can tell. But me and a lot of people, a lot of analysts, and myself included, I had Cincinnati winning 6 games. I'm not going to lie and say I was really high on them. A lot of analysts had them winning 4. A lot of them had them at the bottom of the division, the bottom of the AFC, but they have surprised everybody. They started off with a really good win, honestly, a solid win overall against Minnesota in overtime. Again, a game that a lot of people didn't expect them to win. They've just been showing up, right? And I think obviously the big one was at Baltimore. And I know a lot of Bengals fans must have been very happy to kind of beat that rival that just had their number the last few years. So talk about just, those type of wins that they've gotten, in the early season going on. What has been the best part about, kind of surprising everyone and taking, the AFC by storm?
Yeah, man. I mean, that win against Baltimore, it was so big for us in so many different ways. Um, I mean, we hadn't beat Baltimore in damn near since Lamar Jackson got there. That was our first win against Lamar Jackson as a team. So that in itself was huge. I think it was huge confidence for the guys doing it in Baltimore, saying, "Hey, look, we're here in the AFC North. We're not just a team that's going to fill out the bottom slot of the AFC North. We're going to compete. We're going to battle. We might end up in the bottom of the AFC North. No one really knows who's going to be there yet this year. But it's like, you know what? We're not going to go down this easy." And you said it earlier. If I saw someone predict the Bengals at 6 wins, I'd say, wow, like they're actually showing some love, because everyone was like 2, 3, 4 wins for us. And, we've already succeeded past all that. So that feels good. But I mean, also too, even in our losses, I know the Jets lost. It's a bad loss, nothing you can say. But in those 3 losses to Chicago, Green Bay, and New York, we've only lost by a total of 9 points. Every single loss has been by 3 points. Mm-hmm. So it's like we're right there in those games. And you do a couple things differently. Maybe you start winning some of those closer battles. It's still a really young team. And I think everyone's just really excited in the city. Seeing the progression of Joe in technically year 2, still kind of finishing his 16-game sample size earlier in the year here. But just with Jamar, the chemistry is right there. And it's been really good to see,
Yeah. So speaking of Joe Burrow, I believe you posted a graphic. It was like the first 14 games of Joe and Aaron Rodgers, by the way. And they had really similar stats. And actually that I picked up on, I was like, wait a minute, that's like really interesting to see. And I remember you asked me this question with the guys on the Bengals Den. You guys asked me, who would I take, Joe or Baker? And people thought I got peer pressure, but I believe in Joe. And I think people are really seeing it right now. I have him honestly right now. I think he's right on the cusp of top 10, if not already in it. He has been phenomenal. He's 20 touchdowns, 9 picks. He's on pace for over 40. I mean, this dude has been phenomenal, multiple touchdown passes in every game. So, what has it been for, kind of the Cincinnati Bengals fan base? How has it been knowing that this guy is the franchise quarterback? And also after that, I want you to answer this, because I think I would still take Burrow at 1 over Herbert. And would you agree with that?
Wow. I didn't expect you to say over Herbert, but
I think he's
I like it. I like it.
Intangibles. I think that's why I would go with it.
So. I like it. So for me, it's actually funny. Everyone views Joe Burrow as the savior in Cincinnati. He's finally like this quarterback who's going to put him over the hump in terms of winning games in the postseason, winning games in the Super Bowl. He has those intangibles to walk into a locker room and lead it as a captain his rookie year. And, I think he's played okay this season, to be honest. And a lot of people are going to be surprised with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think those you look at the 9 turnovers, 9 interceptions, and I think that screams to me, because you look at the games we've lost. It's been 3 interceptions against Chicago, lost us the game. That interception against the Jets Sunday, lost us the game. He threw an awful interception in overtime against Green Bay, should have lost us that game. So for me, I think he's played well, but I also think you still see some of the rookie mistakes there. Meaning, I know his rookie season was last year, but he didn't get that 16.
Yeah, so he hasn't played a full 16, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's at 16 right now, or 15.
Yeah. So actually, I think he has succeeded the 16 mark at this point.
At this point, okay.
This is his 19th game on Sunday. Okay. But he's definitely, man, like, there are some rookie mistakes being made. But with that being said, I think progression has been shown, and I think a lot of that has to do with what the offensive line's done up front. He didn't make any ginormous moves, but just guys who are kind of doing their jobs, like Quinn Spain's doing his job.
I wanted to talk about him. Yep, Quinn Spain's been good.
All the Riley Reef, we brought him in. They're just doing their jobs, and nothing crazy, but it's getting the job done. So they've done a good job this year as well.
And everyone's going to want to talk about it. Ja'Marr Chase. I was a believer that you should take Sewell. But I did say that Chase would be the best receiver out the draft. I just thought that Chase, could make a bigger impact on a Detroit team that needed a number 1. That was my reasoning coming into it. But I know a lot of Bengals fans were torn about this, especially in your comments section between the two throughout, kind of April. And obviously the Bengals went with Chase. And if you look at him now, this dude is probably on pace to have by far the best wide receiver season statistically ever, and one of the best overall receiver seasons statistically ever. So how has that been? How is Ja'Marr Chase, what in your mind, back in April, thought that the experiment would work, and how has it been working now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I was the Team Sewell bandwagon as well back when that whole debate was going. I was like, let's build up this offensive line. You got to protect your franchise. Can't take any risks with that. But the way the Bengals have kind of executed this plan is phenomenal. They brought back Lou Anarumo, offensive line coach. He's got these guys right. I mean, everyone top to bottom. Trey Hopkins a little shaky there, but he's a veteran. He's going to figure it out coming off of an ACL injury. But I will say too, with Ja'Marr Chase, he's just been electric. Like week in, week out. I was talking to my buddy. He's like, I think it was after the 3rd game. He had caught, I think, his 3rd 50-plus yard touchdown. He had 2 touchdowns against Pittsburgh, 1 against Minnesota.
Yep.
He had a 50-plus yarder in Chicago. And he was like, yo, this isn't going to last the entire season. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're probably right. But if you look at it from every single game on, he's either caught a touchdown or had a play that just takes the top off the defense every single play. And for a guy who just to me making a positive play on offense week in, week out, when the offense needs it, it's huge. And it changes the whole dynamic, gets the change moving. Teams can't stack the box on Mixon anymore. So it's great. It's really great.
I was just going to say that, like, I think the reason why some people were on this Ja'Marr Chase train in terms of picking him over Sewell was that he can get the ball in his hands and make a play like this. He can take the top off the defense, as you mentioned. He can change the game with one play, something that Sewell can't really do. Sewell's going to be that consistent guy who wins those matchups one-on-one in the trenches, but Ja'Marr Chase can take, a 5-yard slant and turn it into an 80-yard touchdown, as we saw against Baltimore. And I was actually going to say this. I said this in our pod. I said that Ja'Marr Chase is the closest thing to prime Odell that I actually have seen. That's a big thing, I know, but I think the way he plays his game, the way he can, again, like you said, take this big play to the house or even just get open deep, it's something that just we haven't really seen from a guy this young. And, again, with Odell, right, the flashy kind of, moves after the catch, something that we've seen Ja'Marr Chase do. And again, like you said, every game, there's always just one play that he does that either has broke the game open or at least kept the Bengals in it and have kept them in, these type of games. And that's why I think Cincinnati has been, 5-3. And obviously, the loss to the Jets, that's fine. I think that's, that is a loss that I feel like a young team can easily learn from, right? You're a big favorite going in, you kind of fall short under expectations, right? You kind of let Mike White of all quarterbacks kind of do it. Again, you didn't have much film on him. So, that sometimes that'll happen, right? A quarterback like that, hell, Matt Flynn threw 6 touchdowns against Detroit. So like, we've seen things like this happen. But I think the Bengals are learning, young team overall. Their stars are all pretty much young. And I think they're all learning from this. They're all, getting better as the season goes on, because in December, January, experience matters. And I think this team is just learning to kind of, prepare themselves for that, because I think they're going to be in the thick of the race at, the end of the season. And I'm sure most Bengals fans agree with that. But I'll also kind of switch it over to this, right? I think a lot of players have stepped up. As you mentioned, Quinton Spain, I was going to mention him. I think Jonah Williams has had his ups during the season, especially, with the injury rattled, first few years. I think he was taken 2018, pick 11. So, he's, kind of been up and down. Like you said, Trey Hopkins, I believe he's the center, if I'm not mistaken, needs a little bit of work, as you mentioned. But who's been your biggest surprise player? Because I was going to say it's Logan Wilson for me, but I'm sure you could probably give a better take on who's been the best surprise player for the Bengals.
So if you're asking me surprise player from a guy who was on the team last year, and like seeing his progression from this year to last year, I'd say Logan, but probably in general, just Chidobe Awuzie on the outside at corner, man. I mean, he's been such I was high on him coming in, and I always said, this dude just needs the right system. He has all the athletic ability in the world. He's an unbelievable tackler. Dude's an animal. I said he just needed the right system. And not only for Chidobe, but this entire defense. Lou Anarumo's done an amazing job last year. Total 180 from last year, where he has this defense in a very, very amazing position. And obviously, last week is an exception. The defense wasn't good at all last week. But this defense this year has been more than impressive, and it's been great to see. But definitely Chidobe is one of my most I'm definitely most impressed with Chidobe so far this year.
He was a former corner for the Cowboys, if I'm not mistaken. And then Logan Wilson, I just wanted to shout him out because, again, I've been talking a lot about him on the pod. I believe he has 4 interceptions in 8 games, 72 combined tackles. I mean, that's like for a second-year player who was drafted in the 3rd round last year. I mean, that's just insane improvement. The Bengals run this 4-3, so he's been really good in his type of role. I really like the way he has been playing. Now, I want to switch it over to the coaching staff. I think that's also another thing that I want to talk about specifically for the Bengals. Zach Taylor, a guy who was on the hot seat last year, at least in the NFL media's eyes. Bengals fans, I'm not entirely sure how they were kind of portraying him, but I know a lot of them were kind of angry at him, especially towards the end of that season. Especially that game against the Ravens, losing like 34-3, I believe, final week 2020. So, what are your thoughts on Zach Taylor? Has he been a good coach? Do you think he's in the conversation for Coach of the Year? Things like that.
I mean, before last week, I definitely thought he was in the conversation of Coach of the Year. I think he got bumped down a couple of notches in the power rankings after last week, but there's time to make that back up. But believe it or not, I'm one of the few Zach Taylor believers in this world nowadays, especially in the Cincinnati Bengals community.
Interesting.
And I think it happens because a lot of people don't really understand. It takes a long time, especially when you come in year one. You still have Andy Dalton. Not only do you have to get your quarterback that you're going to be with for the duration of your contract there on your first head coaching contract in, but you have to get all these old players out. You had to get Geno Atkins out. You had to get Carlos Dunlap out, Drake Kirkpatrick. Yep. There were so many guys that kind of flipped over. And I think now, you look at it now, he only has Kevin Huber, the punter, is the only player remaining from that team when he took over in 2000.
Wow, that's crazy to believe.
And Jonah Williams. So actually, I lied. There's probably a couple from that 2018 draft class because that was his first draft. But yeah, it's a completely different team, and he's only really had a year and a half with that team. It's going to take time to build a chemistry, to build a roster. This roster just wasn't handed to him. He had to work to get every single guy in the place he is. And now when he finally has his guys, finally has a healthy roster, he's been able to prove, hey, we can win some big football games. And if we don't win games, we're going to compete with top dogs like Green Bay. And we can go into Baltimore and beat teams of that caliber. So I think obviously you got to iron out some things like every head coach that has to do. There's always going to be mistakes a team makes. But I think Zach's been amazing this year. I think Lou Anarumo has done an amazing job as a defensive coordinator. I think he's done as good of a job as you could do with this defense. And then as Brian Callahan, I'd like to see the offensive play calling take some more shots deep, but other than that, I think it's been really, really great.
That's good to hear because, some coaches, not all coaches can kind of be like Kevin Stefanski and come in first year and take the Browns to the playoffs. So now we'll kind of switch it over to my team, which is obviously struggling. There's been a lot of turmoil. And again, I heard Chris Broussard, an NBA analyst, actually say this on First Things First. He said that the Browns cannot handle expectation. Every time that they've been favored to do well, 2019, when they got Odell, right? They got all these pieces and they said, hey, second year Baker, they're going to do some things this year. Fall short 6-10. The year that they're not expected to do well, 2020, they have the surge go 11-5 when they're expected to not beat Pittsburgh. They go in there, win a wild card game. And then obviously, this year they've had hopes of potentially being the AFC champions. It's just not worked out so far with a 4-4 start. And obviously we're going to talk about it more in another episode on the pod, but Odell Beckham, the whole thing is kind of, started out, people from his camp, right? His father released the video. LeBron, even, who has been his friend and been his, ally throughout social media, also said something. And I think right now they've said that Odell is not going to be with the team probably for the rest of the year, not getting traded or cut. Obviously, trade deadline has passed. So as I'll get your perspective as just not a Browns fan, as a Bengals fan too, but just because they're playing this week too, what are your kind of thoughts on the whole situation? How do you think this affects a team like this?
I'll be honest, this Browns team, man, could be 4-7, 4-9, and I'd still be afraid of this team. I think this team too, and also I don't think a 4-4 start is awful for this team. I think maybe it's something they might need. I mean, you have guys who almost did it last year. They were what, like that fourth down, if I'm not mistaken, against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship, correct? Mm-hmm. From making the Super Bowl and potentially Baker marching them down the field to making the Super Bowl. So for me, it's kind of seeing how this team bounces back. And with that being said, they've been killed by the injury bug, man. I mean, I saw Jack Conklin went out last week. I saw JOK. He's on the IR. That's devastating to see a young guy who is that versatile at that linebacker position go down. Mm-hmm. That's horrible. Denzel Ward, if I'm not mistaken, is dealing with some stuff.
Questionable went out last week. Yep.
I mean, so part of it is, the success hasn't been there in wins, but there's also some circumstances that Stefanski or anyone on the field can control. And I think that Steelers game, that game could have gone either way.
Yep.
I'm not tuned into the Browns every week, so I don't know which game could or couldn't.
A lot of them, the Chiefs, the Chargers, you could say, the Chiefs and the Chargers ones were two that, could just go either way as well.
Yeah. So like the record right now, the record's 4-4, but I think they're a much better team than that record shows. And I think that this is a team that no matter what, even if they drop next week, even if they lose the next two and they're 4-6, I think this is a team that can shoot up rankings really, really fast. And I think that was proved by that 2019 year. I mean, they were having a tough season, and then at the end, they just started compiling wins, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yep. They did have some wins down the stretch. So,
I think if they stay at that 500 mark, man, they can get hot a little bit at the end here. But
that is true. I think you are a lot more optimistic than I am. I actually said last year after week 1, where they got stomped by Baltimore, they got stomped, I believe, like 38-6. I said that the week 2 game against Cincinnati was actually, if they had lost that, I thought they wouldn't make the playoffs. And I know it was back week 2, but my thing was that it's all about confidence and it's all about narrative. I think, like, for example, which is why I posted that whole paragraph about, Odell Beckham on the pod. It was just, my thing was, I don't want these narratives, coming in. It's just unnecessary, right? Every week, it's if you don't do well without Odell, it's like, oh, he could have done better. And every week, that Odell is out there and he doesn't do well, it's who's at fault? Is it Baker or is it Odell? And this happens every week that Odell plays. It's every single week. You hear it all the time. And I think that's just so unnecessary for a team that's trying to build a new culture here that was started by, guys like Baker, Jarvis Landry, right? And now you got a stability with Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry. And I just think it's just all unnecessary narratives that are coming out because of Odell's media presence. And I think for me, if you lose a game like this to Cincinnati, right? And I posted also a poll that said, is the season over if they lose? I actually do think it is, because the AFC is it's a lot less top heavy this year, right? There's no like 4, bona fide contenders like there were last year, right? Kind of everyone was under the Chiefs, the Bills kind of shadow. here it's pretty wide open. Every team kind of has their flaw, right? I mean, we've seen it from every single team, even the Bills, who kind of just, got outplayed by Tennessee, right? And again, Tennessee, no Derrick Henry. The Chiefs have looked really bad, right? There's just every team. Baltimore, right? Again, got stunned by Cincinnati. So there's every team's got their questions. And I think for Cleveland, right, as you've kind of mentioned, they can get hot at any point. But I think it all depends on where they get their confidence from and how they get their momentum. And I think this is a really pivotal game, considering that, let's say you do fall to 4-5, you've kind of got this target on your back, considering that you're not playing Odell. What's going on with it, right? That narrative's just going to keep going on. And I just don't want it to distract them, which is why I think this game, again, at Cincinnati, we know what happened last time at Cincinnati, Baker's best game of his career. And again, that was when Odell got hurt. So, right, torn ACL, and then Bake comes in, 20 straight completions and that game-winning touchdown to DPJ. So, I mean, there's just, a lot of narratives that are going to come into this game too. But if they lose it, right, is that kind of a beckoning call for Cincinnati to say, hey, maybe we've overtaken you in terms of the, AFC North this season and maybe long-term, because Joe Burrow's not going anywhere. Jamar's not going anywhere, right? A lot of these pieces are still going to stay there, assuming Jesse Bates gets re-signed. And I think, you had a post, and I agree with you, that dude needs to stay, true leader on that defense. But that's, I think, my take on the whole, this type of game. I think it's really, really pivotal, which is why, I want to ask you this too. How important is this game for the Bengals season, right? Because I know it's, a week 9 game, but this is the, Browns' second divisional matchup in a row. I know you guys have had 2 and you've won both of them, right? Steelers and Baltimore. So if you win this one on Cleveland, you've got 3-0 against, the 3 guys who are supposed to be, the top dogs of the AFC North. So, how important is this game for Cincinnati?
This is the biggest game of the year so far for the Bengals, without a doubt. I wouldn't be driving 8 hours up to Paul Brown Stadium on Friday to go to the game if it wasn't. But this is by far the biggest game of the year for us. I mean, if we lose this game and Pittsburgh and Baltimore wins next week, we're bottom of the division. In a 2-week span, you go from the top to the bottom, and that can't happen. And I mean, it's hard. You got to turn yourself around really fast after that New York Jets game, and a lot of times that can shake your confidence. A lot of times that can do stuff to players' heads and affect their play on the field. But it's going to be a hard turnaround, and they just got to put that in the past. But there's one thing I did want to touch on, just with the Odell thing. I don't get to talk about Browns much, so I'm actually happy to talk.
Yeah, of course.
Odell is my favorite non-Bengal player. I love Odell Beckham Jr. I've loved him when he was on the Giants. I even loved him when he was on the Browns. I was like, you know what? Screw it. I love Odell. But the one thing I will say is for his dad to go out and post that, and you said it best, Anish, to a team like if Jamar Chase's dad posts something on Instagram of Joe Burrow, you're building a culture there. You absolutely cannot have that. That is the one thing you cannot have. Sure, you'll deal with the injuries. You'll find guys to fill the gap with injuries. But the one thing you can't have is one of your star players' fathers going on Instagram. And who knows? It could have been Odell taking his dad's phone. It probably wasn't, but who knows?
I think he had to have posted that with Odell's green light. There's no way he just did that without, his son's consent. There has to be some tie in there.
I agree with you. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents. But getting back to the topic, this game is massive for both teams. And it's going to be fun. I mean, Battle of Ohio games are always fun.
Always, yep.
The thing is, it's in Cincinnati, but, it's going to be 50-50, Cleveland, Cincinnati. Like I'm traveling 8 hours to go to the game. There are people in Cleveland who can probably travel, 3 hours, 3.5 hours?
I think it's, 3.5, something like that.
Yeah, get to the game. So it's going to be 50-50 crowd. It's going to be really fun. And both teams are super desperate. Both teams are motivated coming off really close losses. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be a really good one.
Baker Mayfield, everyone says it I don't know what it is, but I wouldn't say he's completely owned them, but he is 5-1 in his career against the Bengals. That one loss was, I believe, the last week of the 2019 season. And just capped off a terrible game. Ironically, Odell had an insane
Andy Dalton's last game as a Bengal.
Yep. And ironically, it was that Odell had a sick catch on 4th down. I remember watching his highlight. It was like an insane toe tap. So it was ironic talking about that. But, this is, again, and I think the Cincinnati game, I believe it was week 7 for the Browns last year. I thought that turned around their season, because I thought if they had lost to Cincinnati, right, again, a rebuilding team, and they were down 0-10, right, and Baker had thrown a pick just to Odell, or targeting Odell, they were down 10-0. If they had lost that game, right, they're 4-3, no momentum at all, 2 straight division losses. I don't know if I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to, reach, could be a reach, but I don't know if we would have been playoff bound. I think, again, big momentum swings, but, Baker got his footing again. And I always hear Skip Bayless talk about it every time I watch, them talk about the Browns. Baker went 8-3 down the stretch. He had, 20 touchdowns, 3 picks. And it's true, because ever since that game, he just turned on a whole new click, and every part of the Browns was clicking. They upset teams like the Titans, right? They had that insane game with Baltimore, and obviously the Pittsburgh game with, shocking the world. So, I think this is also a game where a team like Cleveland, who's struggling right now, right? Again, ironically, a loss to Pittsburgh and then going to Cincinnati, that also happened last year. Can they turn it around, and can this be a spark of some games down the stretch? Because Browns fans who are watching this, and also Jared, I'll tell you, our schedule is not that favorable, because, after this game, we still got to play Cincy again. We got 2 games against Baltimore, still got to play Pittsburgh, the Packers. Only game we're favored against will be the Lions. So there is a very, very tough schedule, looming for us. But if we pick it up here, momentum kind of carries over. So, I'll kind of transition it. If you want, you can go ahead and give your game pick. What are you thinking between this pivotal matchup?
Yeah, I'll be honest here. So I'll give a couple things I like about the Browns and what scares me a lot. Obviously, the first thing when you look at this roster, Myles Garrett pops out to you.
Yes.
And I'm terrified of Myles Garrett. I think this guy is it's just when you have a quarterback like Joe, who's still rehabbing from that injury, whose mobility isn't 100% back yet. It makes me nervous. It makes me scared. How's he going to match up? How's Riley Reef, Jonah Williams, the interior guys, going to be able to handle him? So I'm worried about that. And I know Denzel Ward, I don't know what his status is for Sunday, but I do know they brought in 2 really good a corner and a safety that I love from LA. And Troy Hill and John Johnson. I love those guys. I thought those additions were amazing. Exactly what the Browns needed, that slot cornerback. And then a guy like John Johnson, who's just the ball hawking guy over the middle. He can come down to the box tackle. So I love this Browns defense. I do think it's a little banged up, and I do think there will be some points where the Bengals can take advantage of that, especially the linebackers. I think the front 7 is going to be a hard front 7 to run on. So I think this is going to be a really heavy Joey B passing game. I think mixing out of the backfield will be a big thing to watch. And then from the Bengals defensive side of the ball, Nick Chubb, man, I'm terrified of him as well. And even with Jack Conklin out, this offensive line is still, in my opinion, one of the top in the league. You just look at it. I mean, JC, is it JC or JT Treader?
JC Treader. There you go. Gotcha.
Yeah. So I mean, like Wyatt, all those guys.
Oh my God.
You can't forget about Jedrick Willis. That offensive line is definitely the strong point of that offense. So I think that run game is going to have to be up and going. I think Baker, he has that shoulder injury. It's going to be interesting to see kind of the game plan with that. Obviously Odell's out. That doesn't really help the Browns, in my opinion. But it should be interesting. And I think the biggest thing that can't be said enough about this game is both of these teams are going to want this game so bad. And that
agreed.
So much passion, so much physicality that comes with the AFC North. This game could literally go either way. I think we see another similar contest to what we saw week 9, correct?
Week 7
last year. Week 7 last year. I think we see a very similar contest to week 7 last year. One of those games that literally came down to Baker Mayfield throwing that Hail Mary. Which, if it is, we got our money's worth out of those tickets, man. Yep. So I'm gonna go with the healthy team this time, and maybe I'm being biased. I said, either way, I'm gonna say 24-21 Bengals win it. Low scoring game. I usually predict a lot higher scoring games, but I think this is more of the lower scoring games. Thinks the Browns defense has really improved compared to last year, even with some injuries. And I think kind of Baker with the shoulder, that's gonna hurt a little bit. And then also, I think the Bengals offense is going to have a little recovery week in between the Jets week. So that's my honest opinions.
So that, I think I'm not even going to take the bias, because I think honestly, a lot of people right now, the betting for all of you bettors out there, the line is Cincinnati -2.5. So, they are kind of favored. And I like all the points that you mentioned. I think, from a Browns perspective, you're right? Myles Garrett has to be the key here. He's on pace to break the sack record, by the way, which is, people have not been talking about it enough, obviously, because of Trayvon Diggs, but hopefully it starts to get in a bigger light as, the season progresses. But yeah, as you mentioned, Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney is still kind of banged up, I believe, with his leg, something around there, and also his shoulder. But you're right, too. Denzel Ward, don't know his status right now. I think he's questionable. I'm leaning towards he's not playing. So obviously our game plan has to be containing Joey B on third and maybe fourth down. Because again, I think for me, what brought me into Joe Burrow and what kind of, made me a Joe Burrow fan was just how he would make a play on third and fourth down, especially against us last year. Every time we just couldn't get him off the field. I remember week 2 when, we were kind of handing it to him and then he just kind of surges back. I believe they only lost by 11 and, he converted 3 straight fourth down. So, this guy, it seems like he's always making that type of play when you need it from him. So, was it 5?
Yeah.
Well, it was 5.
Remember that last second touchdown of Tyler Boyd? It was literally like we weren't winning the game.
Yeah. It was, I think, because we were up after Garrett had strip sacked him, and then I think we scored, and I think over in the fourth, I think you guys outscored us. But I think like you mentioned, right? Like Joey B, I feel like he's always making that one play that you kind of need him to, right? Again, I'm gonna point to his rookie year a lot just because I watched that a lot more, right? The Chargers game, brought him down there, and then Randy Bullock screwed him over. But he's always making a play like that. So you got to contain him, and the 3 receivers that they have are just absolutely lethal. All 3 showed out against New York, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase, all of which I'm very high on. And one thing I wanted to also mention, you posted about it, the 3 guys coming in together. I believe it was Bates, Mixon, and Tyler Boyd standing and taking that press conference together. I thought that was one of the best things I'd seen all year, just because it shows the leadership of, like you said, of this team. 3 guys that, are going to be there for each other and there for the, Bengals culture. That was one of the best things I'd seen, like, all season. I thought that was amazing. So,
last year,
that's hard to beat.
Yeah. Last year, that doesn't happen at all.
Yeah. So, again, shows how they're kind of moving forward and they're progressing. And then, the key on offense, I guess, for the Browns is just time of possession. I say it every week, like you said, right? You got to run the football. You can't do these. I feel like Stefanski does this thing where he'll run it and he'll throw the short passing game. The whole idea of being a run first offense is to run first and then take the top off the defense. So I hope we do something like that, in the game. And then you're right, Baker Mayfield, what does he have? Because he's showed out every time he's played Cincinnati. So is that going to continue? Is the weight of the whole Odell saga going to weigh down on him? Right. I think that's, going to be a really key thing. But here's what I'm going to say. And I think, for my game prediction. Oh, also one thing on offense, avoid Logan Wilson in the run game and avoid, like you said, Jadobe Awuzie in the passing game as much as possible. And I think, guys like DPJ, Hollywood Higgins, and Anthony Schwartz have to step up. And for my overall game pick, I'm going to take Cleveland. And I think here's why, though. And I know, again, this might also sound biased, but I just think they need this win. And I think without Odell there, they need to prove it to themselves, not, that they can still win without Odell and that this is still Baker Mayfield's team. I think that is, something that they need to prove to themselves. Right. And I think if the game comes down to it, I think, Myles Garrett can wreak enough havoc to where the Browns need to get off to an early start. And I think that's what they're going to do. I think, Stefanski is going to come out really aggressive. And that's why I got a game pick of, I believe, 26-21. I think that's my final score. Like you said, low scoring because the Browns haven't scored over 17 points in the last 3 weeks. So, again, something to keep note of in terms of their juggernaut offense. But if they can really hone in on it, take time of possession away, because you got to limit the big plays from a guy like Joey B. I think you have all the keys to win this type of game. And again, because if they don't win this, I think the season might be over. So I think that's going to be my game pick. But obviously we got 2 sides here, 2 great reasons on why each team can win. But, to kind of wrap this episode up, Jared, thank you so much for hopping on. This is awesome. It's been a while since we recorded. I believe it's been almost, 6-7 months, but just how time flies. And, the Bengals have been doing great. Sorry. Yeah, of course, dude. Always. And, for any Bengals content or anything you need, whether, you know, you want to see a Jamar Chase highlight tape or even a guy like Chidobe Awuzie, you know, not the big name, but again, that's, you know, star in the making, please go check out his Instagram. I'll leave it down below in the description. Again, you know, awesome page. I love, you know, tuning into his lives every weekend. So it's really cool to see. And again, the Bengals Den, a podcast that they record to talk some Bengals football all the time. Please go follow that and subscribe. So that'll be it for us. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next time.